Thinking about this a lot for a while now, and I've concluded that we don't have a competency crisis in this country. We have an accountability allergy. Everybody wants this appearance of responsibility, but nobody wants the maintenance schedule required to maintain it. And today I've got 4 case studies on what happens when you choose optics over ownership. First is a man blaming a luxury car manufacturer for problems that he bought on eBay. Then I've got this sort of tech company who is selling community safety all the while wiring up mass surveillance. Then we've got some lawmakers who say vice is immoral unless that vice can fund the budget. And then last, a congressman who's built his entire brand on family values that he doesn't subscribe to himself. These are 4 different headlines, but all following the same blueprint. And that is what happens when the brand matters more than the burden, when optics replace ownership, and when accountability becomes optional. So, welcome back to Country Cynic. We're going to follow the timeline, the incentives, the numbers, because sooner or later the narrative has to face the math. So, let's see how these stories shape up. So, let's start small. I'm reading this post from Reddit from a guy who's officially done with his Genesis G70. He says it's unreliable, he says it's defective, and he says the brand has really failed him. And I've looked at the data on these cars. I own the same make, model, and year as the one he's referencing. They are precision engineered machines. So then when you take a look at the maintenance log is where it really gets interesting, because here you can see him saying, no, I didn't use OEM parts. I bought them off eBay for $300. So he's replacing critical sensors with bargain bin aftermarket parts from unverified sellers just to save enough money for a value meal. He's putting a $10 chip into a $30,000 drivetrain and then acting all shocked when the ECUs start speaking in tongue. That's not a manufacturer defect. That's a self-inflicted wound. You can't substitute counterfeit parts and expect factory performance. You can't democratize high-end engineering with discount shortcuts. Blaming the brand because you refuse to maintain it properly, that's not a mechanical failure. That's not a brand failure. That's ego maintenance. And it reminds me of how my mom used to tell me, I have champagne tastes with beer pockets. This guy wanted the optics of a high performance luxury car, but his beer pockets couldn't maintain it. And here's the thing. Once you get comfortable swapping out cheap parts into expensive systems, you don't stop at cars. You scale it. And that's what brings us to our next story. So, Flock Safety's been in the news quite a bit lately. They sell neighborhood protection, family branding, clean dashboards, safety language. Then you look at the architecture. There are over 80,000 cameras nationwide, constant license plate capture, data stored, cross-referenced, searchable. This isn't policing based on suspicion. This is surveillance based on existence. And once infrastructure exists, mission creep isn't a theory, it's gravity. Audits show officers are using the system to track political demonstrators, activists, private citizens. In Milwaukee, an officer allegedly ran plates over 170 times to stalk someone he was dating. Where are the safeguards? 170 times and no one caught it. In Georgia, an officer is accused of scraping the surveillance data to train AI tools for a private side business. Your movements monetized. And here's what should concern you more than that rogue behavior. Oversight is even thinner. In Las Vegas, millions of dollars in private foundation money funded a massive camera expansion. And because it wasn't taxpayer funded, public debate was bypassed entirely. No referendum, no city council fight, no voter consent. And don't tell me that that family donation doesn't have access to all the data they're looking for. It was just a quiet installation. And if someone proposed putting microphones on every street corner 20 years ago, people would have chained themselves to the courthouse doors. But wrap it in the word safety, and suddenly security becomes impolite. So now they're building cross-reference systems, linking license plate data to financial records, property databases, and personal identifiers. You don't need suspicion when you have this kind of database. You don't need a warrant when you have an algorithm like this. And when citizens know they're being tracked, going to a protest, going to a clinic, or even to a meeting, that's not safety. That's behavioral conditioning. The most dangerous systems aren't the ones built in secret. They're the ones installed in broad daylight while everyone applauds. And once institutions realize that they can bypass consent quietly, they don't stop at cameras. They apply that same logic to revenue. And that's our next story. So let's go ahead and head over to Indiana, where lawmakers there are firmly against legalizing marijuana. And their argument, proponents just want to boost state revenue. Cynical, morally suspect. But in the exact same breath, they're pushing for a brand new 14th casino license because it's transformative $500 million investment that will bring in significant new state revenue. So it's really funny how a dollar bill is a moral hazard when it smells like weed, but a civic virtue when it's fed into a slot machine. They pearl clutch about cannabis, destroying communities. Meanwhile, the data on casinos is not vague, it's consistent. Personal bankruptcies rise in casino counties, embezzlement increases, local crime ticks upward, suicide rates track higher. We're not talking about dramatic movie villains, we're talking about drained college funds, foreclosed homes, parents hiding paycheck losses from their kids, but the state gets a cut. And when an overflow crowd showed up to protest this casino expansion, the Senate quietly stripped out the local voter referendum. One senator admitted they removed it because, and I quote, "we knew what the results would be." They can't claim to protect society from harm while taping society's mouth shut. You can't call something immoral on Monday and monetize it on Tuesday. That's not leadership, that's branding. And if you think the hypocrisy stops at policy, let me introduce you to the most expensive counterfeit part of them all. So that brings us to our final case study, and that involves Representative Tony Gonzalez, who's in Congress and has built a career brand on family values and defending the sanctity of marriage. He's a practicing Catholic, he's pro life, 6 children at home, anti abortion, public defender of the institution of marriage, all the typical things. But now let's scratch the surface because texts show him soliciting explicit photos from a subordinate, discussing sexual details, arranging private meetings. And when the woman reportedly told him, "This is going too far, boss," he didn't stop. He amped it up further. He told the public the allegations were completely untrue. We hear that all the time. He suggested her husband was blackmailing him. Yeah, we hear that a lot too. But the digital record doesn't blink. And here's what's fascinating to me. If this were just a personal failure, that of course would be tragic. But it isn't marketed as that. It's marketed as a persecution. It's framed as political attack. Representative Tony Gonzalez wants us to believe that he is somehow the victim here. And House leadership shrugs it off, saying if we held everyone to a moral litmus test, nobody would be left in Congress. Well, if the foundation is this rotten, maybe they're not the comforting statement they think it is. Because when you build your brand on moral authority, you don't get to treat integrity like an optional add on package. You don't get to preach discipline publicly while practicing indulgence privately. It reminds me so much of The Handmaid's Tale. And that's not stumbling in the dark. That's installing a counterfeit part in the engine of public trust. And once trust corrodes, it doesn't stall quietly, it spreads. All right, so those are 4 case studies where optics replaced ownership and accountability was optional. And look, I get the impulse. The world is messy enough without us tearing the hinges off every door just to see what's inside. Nobody's asking for perfection. We all stumble. And I've had my own moments that I would handle differently if I could go back and change them. But there's a mighty big difference between tripping over a rock in the dark and polishing that same rock and then selling it as a diamond. There's a big difference between making a mistake and building a business model around that mistake, between failing privately and performing virtue publicly. Whether it's a car, a camera network, a casino bill, or a campaign slogan, when you substitute image over integrity, the bill always comes due. And more often than not, it's the rest of us who get handled the invoice. Now, I still believe most people out there are trying to do the right thing, but the only way this country is going to stay healthy is if we stop applauding the performance and start rewarding the responsibility. Anyway, that's just how I see it. Y'all take real good care of each other out there, all right?